Have you ever heard of a man who stopped the rain for 3 years with a single prayer? A man who called down fire from heaven, raised the dead, and never even tasted death himself? This is the story of Elijah, one of the most powerful and fearless prophets in all of history. Elijah's life was a whirlwind of miracles and wonders. He stood up to wicked kings, confronted entire nations, and demonstrated the power of the one true God in ways that still leave us speechless. He was fed by ravens in the wilderness, brought a child back from death, and in the end, ascended to heaven in a chariot of fire. His story has inspired generations, leaving a legacy so powerful that even centuries later, people await his return. But it wasn't always glory and miracles. Elijah's life was also marked by danger, deep fear, and loneliness. Yet through it all, Elijah remained faithful, his unwavering trust in God making him one of the greatest prophets ever to walk the earth. The story begins in a land under judgment. Israel had turned its back on God, bowing to idols under the wicked rule of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. The land was plagued by corruption and idolatry, and God sent his most trusted servant to set things straight. Elijah stepped forward, a prophet with a message that would shake the nation to its core. With boldness in his voice and fire in his eyes, Elijah stood before King Ahab and delivered a chilling message.
As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word.
And with those words, the skies closed, and the heavens withheld their rain. For 3 long years, the land of Israel became a barren desert. The rivers dried, crops failed, and famine spread across the land like a plague. But even during this drought, God's care for Elijah was miraculous. Hidden by a small brook, Elijah was fed by ravens, birds that brought him bread and meat, day after day. But as the drought worsened, the brook itself dried up, and God sent Elijah on another mission. In a small town called Zarephath, Elijah encountered a widow and her young son, who were on the brink of death, with only a handful of flour and oil left to their names. In an act of faith, Elijah asked her to make him a meal first, promising that God would not let her supplies run out. And God kept his word. The flour and oil never ran out, and the widow's family was sustained throughout the famine. But just when things seemed peaceful, tragedy struck. The widow's son became ill and died. In her grief, the widow turned to Elijah. Elijah carried the boy to an upper room and laying him down, praying with intensity. Elijah stretched himself over the boy and prayed with all his heart. 3 times, he cried out to God, and on the 3rd time, the boy's life was restored. Elijah had performed the first recorded resurrection in history. But the most famous moment in Elijah's life was yet to come, a showdown between Elijah and the false prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. In front of the nation of Israel, Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to call down fire from their God to consume a sacrifice. For hours, the prophets cried out to Baal. They shouted, they danced, they even cut themselves, yet there was only silence. Then Elijah stepped forward. Elijah built an altar, dug a trench around it, and soaked the sacrifice with water 3 times, to make sure it was impossible for any ordinary fire to consume it. Then he prayed.
Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God.
And in an instant, fire fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. The people fell to their knees, proclaiming, "The Lord, He is God." Elijah then prayed for rain, and after 3 long years of drought, the skies opened up, and rain poured down upon the land. But Elijah's journey was far from over. His victory over Baal's prophets made him a target, and Queen Jezebel vowed to kill him. Fearing for his life, Elijah fled to the wilderness, where he fell into despair. Alone and broken, Elijah prayed for death. But instead of abandoning him, God sent an angel to strengthen him, leading Elijah to Mount Horeb, where God spoke to him, not in the wind, or the fire, or the earthquake, but in a still, small voice. In his final days, Elijah continued his work, training a young prophet named Elisha, who would inherit his mantle. But Elijah's story didn't end like that of other men. Visual of Elijah and Elisha by the Jordan River, the river parting as Elijah strikes it with his cloak. As Elijah and Elisha traveled together, a chariot of fire, drawn by horses of fire, suddenly appeared. In a whirlwind of glory, Elijah was taken up to heaven, without ever tasting death. Elisha watched in awe as his mentor disappeared into the heavens. Elijah's mantle, his cloak, fell to the ground, a symbol of the prophetic power passed on to Elisha. And with that, Elijah became one of the few in history to ascend to heaven alive. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.